Welcome, everyone. Really excited to have you all here for RFP Readiness. This is part one of our three-part series on RFPs, but also generally on getting more business development as a nonprofit consultant. I'm really excited to partner with Alfredo Ramirez at Prosal today. As you'll see throughout today's session, he's an RFP expert. He does a lot of work, and Prosal does a lot of work of making sure that not only RFPs get to nonprofit consultants, but also working on what does a more equitable, more accessible RFP process and business development process look like for nonprofit consultants. I also wanted to say happy Pride Month and happy yesterday, Juneteenth. I'm excited to celebrate both of those with several of you in the community. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Alfredo.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. And hi, everyone. Like Lauren mentioned, I'm Alfredo, and today I'm going to be talking to you about RFP readiness, the first of three sessions, and specifically how to figure out if RFPs or requests for proposals are right for you. And if they are right for you, how do you go about bringing that into your process? We're a small group, so this is I think we can keep this fairly interactive. Like Lauren mentioned, feel free to comment in the chat, ask questions. I do have ample time at the end for Q&A. I know RFPs can be a bit of a beast for some folks, and I want to make sure that there is a conversation that we can have. So I can answer some questions, y'all can share some of your experiences, and maybe even the questions that you ask, you'll find can be answered by other folks in the group. We also have plenty of resources and a few cool surprises at the end that we'll be including and dropping into the chat. And anything else that comes up, feel free to just chime into that chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on it as well as Lauren. Before we get started, I do want to just acknowledge and pay respect to the original and enduring custodians of the land on which I am presenting on today. I am based out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is the part of the traditional territories of the Cherokee Nation. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Cherokee people. And I want to acknowledge the painful history of forced removal from this territory. Chattanooga does sit on the Trail of Tears. And I want to honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples that are still connected to this land, thank them for their ongoing contributions, and recognize their stewardship of this land and many others throughout the generations. So with that, I want to, again, just share a little bit what you can expect in the next 60 minutes. Share some intros in the chat. I know some folks are already talking about that already, but I also and I want to just call out a few questions and get you all engaged. We're going to talk about what are RFPs, what is a good RFP, how to spot them along with bad RFPs, some of those strategies for success. I do have some challenges and examples to share in those strategies for success, as well as examples of good RFPs. Where do you even find all these RFPs? I'm going to talk about a lot of RFPs, but at the end of this, you might come and ask, well, where do I find all these things? And there's plenty of places that you can find them. I'll be sure to include them and share those links. And then I'm going to be leaving some time throughout the presentation to talk about building your team and your proposal. Really, that sets the stage for part two of those of you that are going to be interested in participating. And then again, at the end, we'll have some Q&A. First off, who am I? Why am I even here? What do I know about RFPs? My name is Alfredo Ramirez. I am the co-founder and the COO of Prosal. Prosal is an RFP platform that helps agencies and consultants to find, qualify, and win RFPs. We've been doing this now for a little bit over 3 years. In that time, we've worked with over 7,000 agencies in business, and we've helped them win over $50 million in RFPs, and we're sharing millions of dollars in new opportunities every single day. Before this, I used to run my own digital consulting agency called Alfredo Digital, working mostly with environmental organizations and foundations. In that time, I also applied to and won and lost a lot of RFPs, a lot of other business development projects. All of this really has been done in an effort, and part of the session today, and really what we've been building over the last 4 years, has been geared to helping businesses of all sizes and all backgrounds to grow at the pace that they want and with the clients that they want, and that RFPs can be a reliable means to do so. Like I said, I'm going to be talking a lot about RFPs today, and I know everyone's experience can vary when it comes to that. So I'd love to get to know you, who you are. Please, in the chat, if you have a moment, share your name, your pronouns, where you're calling from, and what do you want to get out of this session. We can take this in a lot of different ways. I already have an idea of it, but again, we got a small group here that feels pretty intimate, and I want to make sure to help each and every one of you with some useful information as I continue to talk. I know y'all are already typing in the chat, but I want to just throw this one all at you. When I say the word RFP, what comes to mind? So we got Shauna, waste of time. Hey, Linda, how's it going? Welcome from Central New Jersey. Lisa, opportunity, love it. It's exactly what each opportunity, what each RFP is. Jamie, a lot of effort for little reward. Yep, heard on that. We're actually going to talk about those win rates and what you can expect on win rates. But there is a reward at the end of it. Chloe, relating a lot on the RFP experience and what folks are sharing. Nikki, always a pleasure to be talking to you. Jenna, pain in the butt. We'll use the PG version for that one. Latifa, looks like you have some pretty deep experience in the RFP process. Sounds like it's been a success for you, and you're actually trying to figure out how you can be more strategic about it. I love that. That is a graduated next step for a consultant in the RFP process. And Abby, welcome from New York. Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about this process and what it even means. And starting very much, and I love this because this is a perfect transition into what is an RFP? What am I talking about? So an RFP is pretty much a document, a written document that talks about a project, is issued by some kind of organization or entity, and asks a set of qualified vendors, consultants, or businesses to respond to that document in the form of a proposal. An RFP is similar to, but not to be confused, to a host of other acronyms like the request for information or the RFI, the request for qualifications or quotes, which can be RFQ used interchangeably. RFPs are also called tenders in terms of reference, or TORs, in a lot of other parts of the world. Today, the conversation I'm going to focus on today really is about the RFP. Again, similar to the tender or the TOR, if you're familiar with that or you've done work internationally. And a lot of what I'm going to be sharing can be generally applied to RFIs and RFQs if that's something that you are going to be exploring. But at the end of the day, what all of this means, this all falls into this broad umbrella of procurement and purchasing, whether or not an organization has that department. This is how companies and organizations buy something, whether that's a good or a service. They say, I need this thing. I need a new website. I need a communications plan or strategic plan. I need 1,000 pens, or I need to get rid of 20 computers. So that is generally summarized in some kind of document, is published online, sent to a list of candidates, or is openly accessible and available to candidates to go find, like a job posting, and ask for them to respond in some kind of way. The RFP is also a process. We talk about the RFP process. And when we look at an RFP, we might think of just a written document or a PDF or the Excel and appendix attachments. But in all of this is also a process that is disguised in these materials. And that process is generally laid out as well as what the client ultimately needs and wants from somebody. And how you interpret an RFP as well as the information it contains can really offer insight into whether or not this is a good opportunity, whether it's a waste of time or a pain in the butt, like some other people said, or something that can really lead to a lot of relationship building and downstream opportunity and growth for folks. Whenever there's no such thing as an RFP standard. It is probably one of the greatest frustrations that I have had as a consultant, and that I've seen people have. It's very rare that you'll see two RFPs look very similar. But some common ingredients that you'll see included in an RFP is just a general organizational introduction, right? Who are they? What do they do? What is the program? If this is a program that is related to whoever is purchasing the goods or the services, the actual project described, what are they asking for? Whether that is a strategic plan or communications plan or a certain good or travel services needed. What are the goals for that project? What are they trying to achieve or do with the work that is being done or that they're soliciting advice or help on? The actual scope of work, again, can be very detailed, almost to the point that it feels like you're reading a contract, or it can be something very abstract and open-ended. But generally speaking, you will see some kind of scope of work included, sometimes even with a timeline that says these are the things that we want done. We want them done within a specific period of time, maybe even phased out or built out into different elements. Contact information. Who are you supposed to be talking to? Who's important here? Who matters? And then the participation deadline. If there's one deadline that I can definitely say you'll find in every single RFP, unless there's a rolling deadline, which is very, very uncommon. Generally speaking, they'll say, you got to submit your proposal by this day. That's a pretty universal deadline that you can expect to find on every single RFP. Now, there's good RFPs and there's bad RFPs. This is just what you generally find in most RFPs, right? They're not housed in the same way. They're not organized in the same way. But this is what you'll find whenever you open up an RFP from any organization. But what's in a good RFP? What are the things that you really want to keep an eye out for? What's a green flag that you should see waved around that should tell you this is something that I should pay attention to? This is a good opportunity, or this is someone that's at least conscious of how to structure a good process. Because again, at the end, we tie this back to what does this RFP process look like and how am I involved and how do I participate in this process? So a good RFP contains everything that I just mentioned, right? There's no exception to that. Everything that I just mentioned, as well as number one, if this is included, then you are definitely looking at a good RFP, budget constraints. They talk about a budget. If they have any awareness of how much they want to spend, if they talk about maybe past spends on certain similar projects or what they would like to spend in the future, if there's any awareness at all into how much money they have to spend on this thing, you're looking at a good RFP. That's something you want to engage in. Why? First and foremost, again, that indicates awareness on the other side of the client. But most importantly, too, that tells you, am I in the ballpark for this thing? Am I priced in? Is this within reason? Or should I not even look at this because I'm trying to do different work, make a lot more money, or I can tell by the size of this budget, if my contracts are, $5,000 to $10,000 and this person is looking for $1 million contract, I may not be playing in the same ballpark as the folks that are going to be applying here. So budget constraints is definitely one big thing to keep an eye out for. Second thing is key project dates and timelines, right? I talked about the submission deadline. It's something you're going to see in almost every single RFP, but keep an eye out for other dates in the RFP process as well as in the actual project timeline. Some important dates that you might find in the RFP process are intent to bid or bid notification deadlines. Generally speaking, that is just the day by which you need to send an email and say, hey, I'm going to submit a proposal for this thing. It's a really easy way for issuers to cull from the proposals that they might find, and so that way they can receive less late proposals or just less unsolicited proposals at the end. It's also a great way for you to build a relationship with someone and just introduce yourself if you haven't done so already. You should probably keep an eye out also for meeting deadlines or meeting dates. Sometimes a project issuer will have a day where they're going to meet, they're going to have a a bid meeting or just an open meeting where anyone is allowed to come in, participate, ask questions, and also a great opportunity for you to engage in that process and become familiar with who the client is and what their needs are. And then on the other side of that, once the RFP is actually completed, the dates to keep an eye out for, and dates that you should always follow up on when the project is going to be awarded or evaluated, right? Any interview timelines to make sure you're available for those interviews. That award deadline, right? If they say we expect to make this award by July 1st, right? July 1st is coming up right now. That's a key date to be aware of. I remember talking to one of the folks in this community, as part of the Prosal community as well, that he won an RFP. I kid you not, for this one reason only. The deadline, the day that the award was supposed to be given was something like October 1st. And he hadn't heard anything on October 1st. So on October 2nd, he sent them an email to say, hey, you said you were going to give an award out on October 1st. I haven't heard from you. I just want to follow up. And they replied to him and said, we can tell you're on top of everything. We can tell you're a good project manager. We need a good strategic planner for this. And because of your very focused and very immediate follow-up on a deadline that we did not hit and we did not inform you of, we're going to come and give you this project. So just to give you some insight into how even the tiniest little details matter. And then generally speaking, the project timeline, right? You all have clients, you all have work you're doing. You want to take vacation as well, right? You want to take some time off. Look at those timelines if they are available, and if they're not, go back and ask for them to see if there is an opportunity for you, if this is the right opportunity for you based on the current projects that you have or the projects that you expect to be coming into fruition. Opportunities for engagement. I don't know how many times I've sent an email for an RFP and I've gotten an out of office reply. It is just the worst feeling ever. I usually write those RFPs off right off the bat. That's not a good RFP. The fact that it's like, I mean, if you're hiring somebody, right, and you say, hey, I want to hire for this person, feel free to send me any questions you have. And then you leave for 2 weeks until the deadline of that job submission. You probably don't care about it that much. Either that, or you're not going to be a fun person to work with. Either way, not a good sign, something to keep an eye out for. An assessment. You are all experts at what you do. I'm sure there's a ton of different fields and a ton of different services offered between everyone here. You know best about the things that you offer, and you know if someone is smart in terms of what they're talking about or they're not. So read an RFP with detail. And if they are being smart about what they ask, right? Things like those budget constraints, or they're talking about specific software or methodologies in a approach, that means that they've done their research. They've probably talked to folks, or they have experts on staff, and they're completing an informed process with some informed evaluation. And again, this is just a good RFP. The team composition. If they're able to share I'm gonna just stop on there. I see a hand in the chat. Shauna, what's up?
Yes, sorry, I thought my video was going to be working. I didn't mean to be mysterious. What about RFIs? I just responded to one and they didn't have the budget. That was kind of the purpose of the RFI, was to find out what this kind of thing would cost. And they weren't informed. They're clearly taking a step before the RFP to get that information. So is that all acceptable within that context? And also, while we're talking about RFIs, what's the difference between an RFP and an RFQ?
Yes, so an RFI really is market research. I have a whole slide on this, and I'm going to get into this down the road. But just to beat you to the punch, you definitely want to reply to RFIs if it's a client that you want to work with. RFPs are informed by RFIs. A lot of times there's no budget in an RFI, and for good reason, because they're doing that research. Think of an RFI as your opportunity to shape the RFP, right? If they're going to be doing some kind of, I'll do something simple, website, right? They want to do a redesign of their website, and they don't have anyone that knows the first thing about websites on their staff. That RFI is the time to tell them, this is how much you should budget for a website. This is how long your website is going to take. This is the type of software that you should be using, the type of CMS or the type of platform you should be using for your website. An RFI is a really good opportunity to shape the RFP in 2 ways. First, so that they're smart about what they're ultimately requesting. And then second, it's an opportunity for you to shape it in the direction that benefits you, right? If you only work in WordPress, you don't want them to put out a Webflow or a Wix RFI. You want to ideally have a WordPress RFP to respond to. So think of that RFI as an opportunity for you to engage and be a good partner with them while also sharing, hey, I do all these things. This is what I do best, and this is my experience. So if you want to consider me as part of the pool of candidates, these are the things that you should probably ask for. RFQs, I'll get to that at also on that market research stage. They exist in this this weird stage between RFP and RFQ. Sometimes they'll come after the RFQ, or sometimes they'll come after the RFP, I mean. Sometimes an RFI will jump immediately to RFQ. Generally speaking, an RFQ, when I talk about RFQs, I'm talking about requests for quotes. That means that they're kind of past the proposal stage. They're just looking for costs. They don't really care about the scope of work. They just need someone to come in and say, hey, this is how much it costs for me to do this thing. The request for qualifications is between the RFI and the RFP stage. And that is usually a more focused intent to bid. An RFQ pretty much says, hey, give me your credentials, and when the RFP comes out or when an opportunity comes out, I'm going to let you, I'm not going to make it available to everybody else. I'm only going to make it available to the people that responded to my RFQ that I approved of, or that the team approved of. Just moving a little quickly through these. Team composition, if the RFP says who's involved, who are the stakeholders, who's the end user or the problem owner. Again, that's a good RFP, means they did their research, they're identifying the right people, and they're giving you information about who to go talk to so that you may create a smart proposal. And then lastly, incumbents. I rarely see this shared, but when I do, I love it. If they talk about, if this is a project that has previously been run, or that they have put out to RFP in the past, and you can see, or they publicly share who ran this project before them, right? If it was one of your competitors, if it was someone else, that gives you insight into who previously did this, what did they like about them, what did they not like about them, and why are they even looking to replace them now? Questions to ask if you see something about incumbent information. Again, what worked with this? Why aren't you renewing with them? What would you change about them? And why did they win this in the first place? Opposite of this, there's a lot of good RFPs, there's a lot of meh RFPs, and there's a ton of really, really bad RFPs, terrible RFPs out there. There's probably no shortage of them, and a lot of them is, I think, what might color folks' experience in terms of having a pain in the butt time with RFPs. Things to keep an eye out when you see an RFP. It has a ridiculously tight turnaround time. They say, we want proposals in 3 days and 7 days. Don't do it. Don't touch it. Average proposal takes about, in my experience, 10 to 20 hours. Some people kick it out in 5 hours. Some people kick it out in a week. If you need the 2 weeks, and generally speaking, the average time is 2 weeks. If you need that time period, or if you see something with less than a 2-week turnaround time from when it was issued, not a good RFP. They're in a rush. You don't want to work with people in a rush. Unreasonable budget. If they come in and they ask for the moon, the stars, and the entire planet, and they say, we got $5,000 for this thing, you all are valuable. You all know what you're worth. Don't underprice yourselves. Don't do it just for the experience or for the client case study. At least in my experience, and other folks can probably resonate with this, the folks that are paying a higher budget or a higher dollar are generally less likely to complain and be a pain in the butt than those lower budget clients. So remember that experience when you're looking at a low budget RFP. Uninformed and conflicting technical details. Again, y'all are experts at this. If someone says, I want to use open source technology, but then they go around and they talk about using some kind of private or proprietary technology, there's conflicting information here. This thing was not composed well, was not read well. That can only speak to what the process is going to look like. In any of your fields, there's probably conflicting methodologies, conflicting approaches, and even something as simple as just the timeline, right? If they tell you that they wanted something due by this date, and then somewhere else in the RFP, it references that that thing is actually due before or after what they mentioned earlier, that is a critical detail to know it. Those details are like typos in your proposal. You want to make sure that they resolve those before they went out to RFP, because chances are if they didn't resolve it when it went to RFP, you're going to have to deal with that during the contract phase or even during the project phase. I mentioned this earlier. If you get that out of office when someone asks a question, or when you ask a question, right? Or you say, hey, can you meet? And you get the out of office and they say, I'm not going to be back until like a few days or even the day that the deadline of the RFP is. Don't touch it. It's not a good RFP. Stay away from those. If they don't give you opportunities for meetings or for Q&A, they say no questions. We do not take any meetings. We don't want to answer any questions. Is the same thing as the out of office. And it also potentially leads to, and this is going to go to my last point, it potentially leads to someone already being pre-selected. I know a lot of people here have the idea that RFPs are written with someone in mind. That is generally not the case. However, there are instances where if someone did really well in the RFI stage or did really well in the market research stage, and they crafted an RFP in a way that benefits them, the issuer might be inclined to add these requirements in. So just for this point, if you don't see any Q&A allowed, if you don't see any meetings allowed, think to yourself, if they're not going to make time for me to respond to a question or to have a 15-minute call, why am I going to dedicate 5 to 20 or 40 hours to write a proposal for that? And then the last piece, oddly specific requirements. If you see something like 7.5 years of reproductive health experience with 2 years of grassroots organizing, 5 years of knocking on doors, and you have this specific certification, be careful with that. You might have it. You might be competitive. And if you do check off all those boxes, props to you, reach out, try and build that relationship. But in our experience, when you see very, very specific requirements, especially for technical projects, it often means that someone was able to contribute in the RFI stage and again, shape that RFP to their benefit. It doesn't mean that you aren't competitive. It just means that they have the advantage. And you want to make sure that you're dedicating your time and your efforts to places where there is a level playing field or where you have the advantage. So I talked a lot about RFPs, but you got to know, are RFPs right for you, right? It's not for everyone. It is for some people. It's not for other people. And I just want to share a few things here that will help you determine, do I need to even think about RFPs for my business development strategy? First off, what are RFPs good for? They give you long-term contracts. Not only in nonprofits, but in government, in anything public sector, even private sector. A lot of things that go out to RFP, generally speaking, are 6, 12, 24, 36. I've seen 7-year contracts in some RFPs. You want certainty, you want predictability. Winning a long-term RFP is definitely something that will give that to you. Same thing with revenue. You can generally predict what the revenue is going to look like. You know how much the contract is going to be, especially when you're dealing with a 2, 3, 4, 5-year contract. You can predict that revenue out. You know what that means for your business. You know what you can hire. You know what you can spend that money on. In addition to the fact that once you work with somebody, the easiest client to get is one that you already have. You know that you can upsell them. You know that you can expand that scope of work, or at least that is an opportunity. And so these are 2 great points of an RFP in terms of giving you that long-term and that predictable and scalable revenue. RFPs are really good for getting into places that you are not. The great thing about RFPs, especially RFPs that are where you've been able to participate early in the process or you've even been able to help shape the RFP, is that there are fair and open competitive opportunities. Again, when you get in at the right moment. So say you work in Montana, I've seen this. You work in Montana and you want to work with rural communities in Maine. Just because you've never worked in Maine, just because you don't have a presence or you don't have an office in Maine doesn't mean you can't do that. You go find the right opportunity for a rural institution in Maine and you check the right boxes, you can get that bid. I've seen so many organizations break into new territories, new geographies, and new industries because they were able to use the RFP to their advantage and get the clients that they did not have and they couldn't use their networks to get and ultimately grow their business. Testing new business development tactics. Love this one too. if you applied enough RFPs and you have a recurring effort ongoing to apply to these business opportunities, you can use them to straight up A/B test your proposals, right? Do I or do I not include spec work or custom designs? Do I use PDFs or decks, or do I use Word docs? Do I try this language? Do I try this pricing, right? There's a lot of testing available to see what works for you. And I've seen a lot of folks do this. Something as simple as I mentioned earlier, spec work. One of the Mac Glazer, who runs a strategic planning business out of Texas, who's also somebody that's been able to break into places like West Virginia, again, with only an office in Texas and with a team of about 5 people, using the RFP. And so in doing so, he's also tested whether or not to include spec work. And he found personally, just for him, a 40% increase in reaching the interview stage if he included spec work and custom design. Worked for him, doesn't mean it works for everybody, but just saying you can use the RFP and these business opportunities to test things that you might not have been able to include, or you might be scared to include in your regular business proposals. And then lastly, RFPs are a great way to expand your network of leads. I actually know folks so Prosal, RFP platform. Folks come in, they download, they apply to RFPs all the time, and they use it for their business development process. I know a ton of people that don't even use Prosal for that. They're paying us, they've been members for like 2 years, and all they do is look at these RFPs and they see, all right, well, if they're doing a rebrand now, I know they're going to do a website redevelopment in probably 6 months. If they're asking for this project, I know that this project is coming up after. Or if they're asking for this project in this way, I know they're going to mess up, or I know that there's something that they're missing. Let me go reach out to them and tell them, hey, don't forget about this critical piece. An amazing opportunity to take these RFPs and reconfigure them to take the third path, right? It's not about don't apply or apply. You can actually use these to your advantage and say, who can I talk to in this from this RFP in this organization that is doing this work that fits into the profile of my ideal client? RFPs suck. I have a whole t-shirt. I think some of you may have seen me at N10 or a few other conferences where I have like an RFP sucks pocket tee, and people love it. They laugh at it because it's true. You all said it. I don't know how many people in this chat were sharing earlier. This is a pain in the butt. This is a waste of time. It's way too much effort for the reward. And you're right. The average RFP win rate is about 30%, and that's still good. Like, I see folks that are extremely proud of a 38% win rate. That means you're losing more than you're winning. It can be a hard knock to take on the chin, but the folks that do so with pride, and they end up scaling their businesses and getting that predictable long-term revenue in those contracts. Average proposal takes about 10 to 20 hours to write, and I think this is generous. I think this is pretty conservative. I am really detailed whenever I get into my proposals. I'll probably take close to a week, even with all of the templates and all of the materials that I have pre-written. It takes me about a week to get any proposal out. Good news is that you get really good at it. I've seen people that have their templates and their materials so well down packed that they can knock out a kick butt proposal in about 5 hours, maybe even less. It's kind of impressive what you can do once you add technology into the process. But again, that only comes with time and with experience. And especially if you're evaluating if RFPs are going to be good or bad for you, you can probably expect these things to take between 20 and 40 hours. Good news is, the more you do it, the less it takes. Buyers and users are not the same. I mentioned earlier that RFPs fall into this broad department of purchasing and procurement, right? Sometimes the person that is listed on the RFP of, hey, hit me up if you have any questions, if you have any problems, is not the same person that's going to be using your tool or your product or your service. You need to learn to distinguish those and do some form of stakeholder mapping early on, where you can figure out, am I speaking to the person that I'm going to be working with? And if I'm not, I need to find a way to get into that room, into that conversation, so that if that person is going to be using my services or my goods, first off, that they can be my champion in the evaluation committee or whenever the evaluation criteria comes their way. And second, I can truly and genuinely understand the needs from their perspective and what they want solved, as opposed to what was interpreted by whoever wrote this RFP and is running the contract. I mentioned earlier too, RFPs are different. No one of them is like, I've seen 2-page RFPs, I've seen 200-page RFPs. The 2-page ones are generally better than the 200-page ones. That said, you really can't approach every RFP in an identical manner. Even if you see two very similar RFPs, the most minute changes make a difference. I'm sure that you all heard at some point before you got into consulting that you have to customize every cover letter, you have to customize every resume. Same applies for these. You have to customize every proposal. You can't just spit something out and then send it to somebody. And to do so, you need to be able to read these RFPs and take the time to digest them in whatever format or way that they were written. RFPs are everywhere. Thankfully, C4G and Prosal are helping solve this. You want good RFPs, we are the way to go. And I'll get to that in a second. But yes, RFPs can feel like they are littered all over the internet, and you may have a tough time finding the ones that are specifically right for you and the services that you offer. Again, that's where Lauren and I can really come in and help you all out on that piece. Last one is that RFPs can take a long time to come back. I was helping someone out, apply to an RFP that was due January 31st. They didn't get their interview scheduled until early April. That was a first round interview. Second round interview got scheduled in late April, and the notifications didn't go out until mid-May, and the contract doesn't hit until like June or July. So it just gives you a little bit of the sense of time that some of these RFPs can take. The fastest ones I see will turn around in a few weeks, generally speaking. And in nonprofit world, they are shorter, right? I think the average time in nonprofit world was probably between a few weeks to maybe at most 2 to 3 months. But if you're even thinking about the government space and applying to government RFPs, you can definitely bet that you're going to be waiting around for 3 to 6 months, if not longer, for especially higher contract and higher contract value and higher contract length RFPs. Now, I want to offer two strategies. I'm not, they're really like, there's no SWOT analysis here. There's no, if right for you, this is what you do. I'm going to offer two strategies. This is pretty much like if you're at a cards game or at a cards table, there's two ways that you can go in terms of an RFP. And if you really want to make this work for you, criticize me if you want, but this is what I did. And this is what I love. The first strategy is you're all in. Second strategy, you're all out with an asterisk. What does all in mean? All in is that you are committed to turning RFPs into a lever of growth for you and for your business. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. 40 hours of writing a proposal, long time waiting for those opportunities to come back in the form of an email, of an interview, of a contract. But you gotta be consistent because these RFPs take a long time to pay out, right? I was talking about just now, someone applied to an RFP in January, doesn't have that contract hit until June or July. Imagine if that was their only contract. What are they doing for the next 5 months? They had, instead, what they did, they applied to a contract almost on a weekly basis. And they, at this point, they've won, at least from what I'm aware of, about 2 or 3 contracts, all pretty high value, but only because they were doing so on a regular basis. And you should do the same. Set a reasonable target for yourself. This is just an example. By no means it's something that you should follow, but rather find something that works for you. Something like apply to 1 RFP per week and don't quit it. Don't say after 1 month or after a few weeks or even after 2 months, this is too hard. I'm not seeing the dividends. I'm going to quit right now. You got to stay committed for at least those 6 months and make this truly work for you and for yourself. And then apply those learnings and add that as feedback into whatever you're doing. In all of this effort, you also got to be extremely detailed and analytical because every RFP is going to be different, because every client is different and every opportunity is going to be different. Even if you're offering the same services to everyone, you want to see what's working and what is not. Track those win rates. What specifically, how many did you win over how many did you apply to? Why did you win those opportunities? What stuck out? You know, in the same way that you might ask for feedback if you lose something, ask for feedback if you win something. Hey, what about me stood out? What did you like? You know, why was I better than the rest? And then take those learnings and apply those to the other opportunities that you're going for. Track the incremental progress, right? Even getting into the interview stage, that is a win. Ultimately, the goal of a proposal is to get you to the interview stage, right? The proposal 9 times out of 10 isn't going to win you the whole thing outright. You still got to show up. You still got to interview well. You got to price yourself well. The proposal for the RFP is just about getting you to that interview stage, getting you to that next phase. So track that win, and then track your success when it comes to interviews, track your success when it comes to closing. You might find that there's drop-off points where you're actually working really, really well in one or two parts of the process, but there's a point of failure at one that leads you to have a lower win rate overall. So track that incremental progress and track those wins overall. And track the other things, the soft wins that come out of it. There's a ton that's come out of RFPs that in just the 4 years I've spoken to people, they'll say, I applied to something and the client came back in a year and 6 months and they said, we should have gone with you in the first place. Or they recommended them, or they said, we liked you so much, we couldn't work with you for this project, but we're going to give you this project because we think that you would do amazing work here. Might refer you to their friends or to their colleagues. There's a ton of other opportunities that may come out of an RFP outside of just that hard win in the form of a contract or a new client. Track those. Make sure you know where those originate and what you can do to keep that wheel of growth going if you decide to spin this all-in strategy for yourself. The other side of this is the all-out. You folded your cards, you're not in the game, you're out. RFPs are not something that you focus on. There's too many other levers of growth for you and your business. There's LinkedIn, there's advertising, there's SEO, there's conferences. There's no shortage of things that you could probably do to go and find new clients inside and outside of your network. Now, this is where the asterisk comes in. You can make exceptions for those RFPs that come your way where you are personally invited to and that occur within your network. It might be a past client that says, hey, we got to go through this RFP process because that's just what's happening here. Or it might be a friend that worked at another organization says, hey, I want to work with you, or I want to really consider you for this project. You should also apply. You should apply to this RFP. Keep those in mind with the caveat in mind to look at the green and the red flags and see, again, if that opportunity is worth your time. Don't forget, even if they were your best friend or they're your roommate in college, look at those flags and see if these opportunities are worth your while. Doesn't matter who it comes from. So this is something I was talking about earlier that I want to stress with the utmost importance for you to succeed. For those that decide to go into that RFP all-in strategy, or even in the asterisk phase, you want to live in market research. What does this mean? When an RFP comes out, there's been a lot of research that's been done. There's a lot of conversations that have been had. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this. I mean, they've already gone ahead and written a whole document and pretty much determined what it is that they need. They might have even figured out what they want to pay for it or what they want to do with this. You want to beat all of that to the punch. I know this can feel hard, but you want to make sure that you have those relationships as soon as possible. Whether it's an existing relationship, you want to build that, or it's a new one, you want to build and deepen that relationship with any project lead, or find a way to get introduced. LinkedIn is amazing for this. One of the first contracts that somebody won on Prosal was this big tech contract. It was the biggest that this company had won at the time. It was like a little bit north of $500,000. It was at least the biggest one that someone had won at Prosal when we had first launched. And the big reason that they won was because of the relationship that the CEO of the company had with the department manager for that organization. It was a private company. They didn't know each other before. They didn't even know each other when the RFP went out. What this guy did is he went on LinkedIn, he looked her up, and he saw he had one mutual connection with her. And what do? He asked that mutual connection to give him an introduction. Hey, please introduce me to this person. I really want to work with them. I'd love to get this contract. Got the introduction, started talking to them recurringly on an ongoing basis, and was able to write the best proposal for him and for his team that led him to win that contract. So use your network to your advantage, and never underestimate the power of a relationship and of human connection. Is even though the RFP process feels transactional and you might feel removed from it, bringing your humanity and your authenticity into this process is something that will definitely make you stand out above other people. Engage, right? Take those opportunities to just demonstrate your intent to bid. find those meetings, participate in the Q&A and the pre-bid meetings. There's so many times that I have seen a Q&A or a pre-bid meeting happen where someone will ask a really smart question and the person who wrote the RFP will essentially turn around and say, well, I didn't think about that. That's actually really smart. I'm going to go ahead and add that right now. These are your opportunities to shape the RFP to your advantage, whether it's in the RFI stage, the RFQ stage. If it is in the Q&A, there's plenty of opportunities for somebody to learn more and to pivot or update their ask so that they essentially make a better ask, but at the same time, change that ask so that it benefits in your direction and increases your competitiveness for that RFP. And I'm gonna hit this one again, check your network, find those mutual connections, and also use your network to build your team, right? A lot of us are solo consultants. A lot of us do this on their own. The biggest contracts that I won when I was running my agencies when I was partnering with someone else. I had this one person out in Michigan that I would partner with on a very regular recurring basis. We went in almost 50-50 on pretty much every single contract. A lot of the contracts we were winning were well into the 6 figures. And it was just us two, right? But if I went by myself, I would have half the expertise and half the team size. But when we went in together, we'd be the two principals. We'd show off. We'd say, hey, we also have this what would we call it? The expanded team or the outside team of experts that we would bring in on an as-need basis. And really show a greater, demonstrate a greater show of force than if we did this individually. Even the folks here, all of you are interested in this in some way. Talk to each other, build those connections. If you see something that you think is interesting or you think someone else is interesting, reach out to them and say, hey, what about partnering on this? What about going in on this together? Apply all the same methodology into those efforts to then find the best opportunities for yourself and then write the best proposal with the best team. We're coming up on the end and I want to make sure we leave the time for the Q&A, but last piece here that I want to talk about is just where to find those good RFPs. Prosal is one of those spots. At this stage, we're reviewing about 120 RFPs every single day. We're probably going to be doing 200 by the end of next week. And our goal is to be able to vet and review 1,000 RFPs by the end of the year. So right now we probably have close to 2,000 active opportunities on the platform. That number is growing every single day. We're summarizing and standardizing and putting all of the qualification information into these RFPs along with estimated budgets to help you make the good decisions and really capture all these green flags and spot the red ones so that you can focus on the things that matter and really scale with the intent that you want for your business. Consultants for Good, also a great place, and Lauren will talk about it in a minute, but Easy Match and the Opportunity Board are two fantastic places to find those not only RFPs, but other just general open business opportunities, ones that are private to C4G, and then the Google group and the Slack group are two fantastic ways to build connection. And then one of my preferred places to also find RFPs, you can go online, you can download you can sign up for a bunch of places, you can go to different portals. But if you're really interested in working with the nonprofit community, with foundations and philanthropic institutions, listservs. There's no shortage of listservs, very much like the one that Lauren started on the Google group. Progressive Exchange and Radcoms are two examples of listservs where RFPs are constantly being shared. There's hundreds of other ones that I can rattle off the top of my head. I'll probably forget most of them. But even something as simple as just reaching out to your friends and say, hey, are you on any listservs where you've seen RFPs or business opportunities shared, or people ask for recommendations for certain things? Those are your opportunities to jump into the assessment or the informing stage and shape an opportunity so that you can be the best one suited to apply to it, to win it, and to deliver for that client. Lauren, I will pass it to you to talk about how Easy Match works.
I'll go quick on this, but basically folks can either submit an opportunity that goes to that opportunity board on the left there. If it matches your categories, specialties, and or your geography, you'll get that directly in your inbox in that managed leads that you can see on Latifah's profile in the middle there. And then on the right, folks can also send you a direct message. So if I'm like, I like Nikki's profile, I want to hire Nikki, I can send kind of an RFP basically directly to you. And starting next week, Those will be even simpler for those direct messages. So it'll be obvious if those are directly to you versus to everybody. And that could also be maybe Nikki wants to hire Jamie for something or wants to hire Lisa for something. It's a little bit easier to have more of a conversation than sending something that's quite as formal. So as Alfredo said, we've got RFPs, but we've also got, I'm looking for a graphic designer to help me out with this. Here's kind of my rough budget. I don't have a full RFP, but send me an email with your resume. So that way you've got opportunities that aren't necessarily always the rigorous RFP process as well. And we share a lot of Prosal's RFPs that are relevant for our folks too.
Amazing. I know I'm gonna skip the whole how Prosal works. I do have a pretty cool list of resources. I didn't touch on all of them, but these are just really good resources to check out when it comes to finding the RFPs, writing actual proposals. I like to use Canva for pretty proposals, and then for the more technologically advanced folks, Figma is a great one for templates and plugins. Google Docs is a great place to store your past answers and to just go back to reference them. ChatGPT, I treat it as an intern, update everything, but great place to start to generate some ideas, get a first rough draft, and then fine tune it yourself. And then Dectopus is a really cool new AI tool that auto generates decks for you. I personally use it for proposal generation in a few instances. And again, not the final draft, something that is to start off, but it's really good. And they do come out very well advanced, especially if you're going to be working off a PowerPoint or Canva or something like that. And then analytics, I talked about tracking your wins, tracking feedback. Another thing that you can do is just track the time spent on your actual proposal. If you have Adobe Acrobat Pro, they do offer analytics if you send your documents as a PDF in a browser version. So you can actually see how much time was spent on each individual page and they view it in the browser. You can also see the number of people that have downloaded it and the people outside of the email that you shared it to that accessed it. There's a few other tools that accomplish the same. If you don't have Adobe Acrobat and you don't want to be paying that subscription, because I know it can be a little expensive, BriefLink was originally designed for startup pitch decks. You can repurpose it for this, same deal. It allows people to download it if they want to see it in their browser, but you can, if they decide to view it in the browser, you can see how much time people spend on individual pages, where they're spending the most time on. Generally speaking, it's on the pricing page. They go straight to the pricing page and then they'll go back and look at everything else. That's just my experience, but you can see where folks are spending the most time on your proposals. And then MailTrack is the same thing with the added benefit that if you don't have it already, it's an email analytics tool that allows you to see when your email was opened, clicked, and forwarded. And they do have that bonus feature for PDF tracking and just general document tracking. I'll share those links in just a moment. And I am gonna just leave 1 minute at the end for an announcement between Lauren and I, but want to open the floor to Q&A. Patrol, I don't think I'd even switched the slide and you were ready to go. So would love to hear your question.
I did. I have, and I'm so glad I attended live today because I had a huge realization. So I shared what I wanted to learn today is that I've really struggled because I've put forth a number of RFPs in 2024 and they've all been rejected. So I'm trying to have a better understanding and troubleshoot of where I went wrong. And I think part of it is because my professional background, I have a number of years in the grant making space. So I've worked in state and local government, foundations, and nonprofits developing RFPs. So I thought that by applying for RFPs, it should be a no-brainer because I'm just doing it on the other side. And I have not had luck considering my professional experience. And I realized it's because there's a difference, I think, between an RFP for a grant and an RFP for services. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on like, what are the main differences between the two? And like, as somebody that was a professional grant maker and was a professional RFP writer, what are some differences for applying for the RFP that I should keep in mind?
Yeah, so I have very little experience in grant writing. That said, I do think those are like two different worlds. I mean, we've had folks that will come in early on when Prosal was just getting started, for like a lot of nonprofits would come and say, oh, can I find grants on here? Or, you know, can I post my grant opportunity on here? And we had to say no, because just the two worlds did not collide well. I think the biggest differences that I see, I mean, one is just compliance, right? Like in grant making, there's a ton of compliance. There's a lot of reporting happening on the back end. That's not something that is generally the case when it comes to RFPs for projects. There might be reporting as to the scope of the project and the progress of the project, but that's none of that is really going to a funder or to somebody that's going to be using that information for future grant making. I think the other different piece is just the structure and the narratives, right? When you apply to a grant or when you're reading a grant proposal, a lot of them are future oriented, right? We're going to do these things. This is what we're going to do with this money. This is what we're trying to accomplish. An RFP and a proposal really should be as backwards looking as possible. Yeah, we're going to do these things. We're going to apply. We're going to, you know, the shall will statements is something that's really popular in the government, where essentially we shall do this, we will do this. But what you want to show off as much as possible in your proposals is experience. That's what matters most to somebody that's reading that is evaluating proposals. In the same way, if you're hiring for a job opportunity, right? What matters most? I don't care about your GPA in college. I don't care about what clubs you were in. I don't care about the accolades and the awards. At this point, anyone can really buy an award for an agency. I care about if you solve this problem for somebody else that looks like me. Because if you did that, then that means that I can trust you to solve this problem for me.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
Shauna, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is about collaboration and having other people on the RFP, especially if they're not really part of your team. So one example was someone who I was doing one project with, just like took my name and took my bio and used it for some of his additional RFPs. And then later, when I didn't win one, I asked for some feedback, and they said, well, yeah, your name was on two different proposals and it was confusing to us and we thought it was a conflict of interest. And I had no idea. So that was one case. And then in some other cases, I've wanted to do work where I do like community assessments for healthcare clinics, and I wanted to do it for libraries, and they're serving the same populations, it's the same tools, but every time I tried to apply for these, the libraries would write back and say, but you're not a librarian and you've never done this for a library before. So I thought, okay, I'll just grab a librarian and put them on the proposal, and maybe that will help me to get that work, even though I was going to be doing probably the bigger lift. So what are your thoughts on like the etiquette and strategy around who gets on the proposal?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of teaming up for a proposal. Even if it's just for the looks and show of it, right? I mean, I've done this and I've been this person too, where, hey, I don't really need you to do work. I don't really need you to actually be a part of the project, but I need your face on this to help me be competitive, whether that's because it's checking off some box or it's showing that we have experience in some field. You know, obviously the compensation that goes with that is something that you should discuss with them. If you're doing the bulk of the work, you should obviously get the bulk of the compensation. In the case of what this person was doing, where you ended up on two different proposals, I personally think that that's super messed up, and you should definitely have a conversation with them to make sure that does not happen again, and that your image and likeness are not being used in any instance without your consent and approval. Not just because of what happened here, where you might have actually lost a proposal, but because of the perception that it might gather and you being associated with someone else and you not being in control of that. Again, but circling back to the point, I'm a big fan of teaming up at all points for any advantage, right? If you're subcontracting, if you're going 50-50, or if you are just using it to make yourself a little bit bigger. One of the early proposals that we got out of the foundation up in the Northeast was somebody wanted to apply to a project. They'd actually worked there. They had pretty much all they had all of the criteria filled out to be able to win it, but they didn't have the domain expertise. They didn't know the first thing about climate planning, climate adaptations, or any of that. And so the partner that I mentioned up in Michigan, she had a lot of that experience. And so we went in on that together to couple it with a little bit of digital expertise. And that resulted in a successful proposal for us. And really, like at that point, he just needed us to do the work, and he was the face of it. And for us, it was, okay, well, we'll take the work if you're just going to be a face of it, and we get to get the bulk of the compensation. But just some examples, and coming back to the point of, partnerships are great so long as they're equitable and they're fair, and that you're both in agreement of what's happening there. I know we're up at time. We're a little bit over time. I know folks are starting to drop off. Lauren, I'll give it to you in a second, but I do want to shout out the fact that there is another RFP session. If you're interested in this, if you like the all-in strategy, or you just want to work, find ways for RFPs to work for you. I am going to be talking again with Adam Probalski and Allegra Mangione, both of them also successful in their own RFP efforts and endeavors. We're going to be talking about how RFPs can work for you. I'm going to drop that link in a second. And then for any of you that one is only for C4G members. So you do got to sign up for a C4G membership in order to attend that. And I am dropping in the chat a code if you're not a C4G member or you're not a member of Prosal. We do have a coupon code here that works for both of them. They're not mutually exclusive. If you decide to sign up for Prosal or you decide to sign up for C4G, Prosal C4G 100 gives you $100 off Prosal and C4G. And this one does not expire. If you are part of a team, keep an eye out. We're also running a sale on Prosal next week, where if you sign up, you're going to get a second free seat added to your account. You can invite bid writers, colleagues, teammates. You can invite your grandma if you want to. But in any case, it's just a way to build up your team on Prosal. If you have any questions about that, reach out to me. Also dropping my email in the chat. With that, thank you, everyone. Lauren, please.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. We hope to see you at the next two sessions. I know a lot of the questions that came up in the chat today were about actually filling out the RFPs and what a successful RFP looks like. So excited to dig into that one next month. Both of these sessions are at 9:30 Mountain Time till 11, so a little longer, have an hour and a half. And once you sign up, we've got a 30-day free trial for Consultants for Good. So once you sign up, you can use that discount code. These will just automatically be added to your calendar. And if you're already a member, those should already be on there. So really lovely to see everyone here. Thanks so much, Alfredo, and good luck on those RFPs and business development over the next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.